Hey everybody, my name is Bill Holmes. Welcome to tonight's edition of ProjectManagementForum.net. We're continuing our ongoing series on, loosely I would describe as change control and configuration management and traceability, but we're going to go down some little rabbit holes here because you have to understand the really big concepts before you can really start to understand what we're talking about when we describe those processes. I'm not going to get really detailed in here, so we're not going to do traceability matrices or work breakdown structures or anything like that. This is going to be a high-level conceptual discussion of those things. So let me start by saying that I was going to begin with requirements, but I really think we need to step back from that a bit. The first thing we're going to talk about is the project charter. Now, the idea of a project charter is so that the purchasing organization, and by purchasing I don't necessarily mean that money exchanged hands, though if you have a contractor, that will be the basis of the contract vehicle. But what this means is the person who actually wants the project is describing the project. And they're describing stuff like inclusions, exclusions. They're describing like what they believe the rough level budget might look like. They might describe how long the person has to do the project. And then that charter is supposed to be given to a project manager. And that project manager is supposed to make an assessment as to the viability of the project. And they can make an assessment as to the viability of the project across several different vectors. They can look at it. Can it be done within the time? Do they have the money? Is that project manager even capable of doing it? And then they are to agree to accept or reject the project. A lot going on in that short sentence. And when I talk a little bit about project ethics, sort of outside the bounds of the sort of ethics and professional conduct series I just did, and I start to talk about more, I guess, practical applications of project ethics, I'll go into that discussion where you have to make a decision about accepting or rejecting the project, because it's not quite as binary as I'm making it sound. But the point is that the project charter describes the project from the purchaser's perspective, from the person that wants the project's perspective. On the other side, you've got the scope. The project manager develops the scope through the requirements and through the scope statement. And so you have, in essence, two bookends to the project. You've got an understanding on one hand of what the sponsor wants. On the other hand, you've got a description of what the performing organization through the project manager believes meets that. And that's the beginning of the configuration management. The scope statement and the charter should be reflective of one another, and everybody should agree with that. Now, I see a lot of times where project managers are writing the charter, and I think that happens primarily because most people who are sponsors are fairly high level, and they don't know anything about projects, and so they say to themselves, I need a new web-based interface for this thing, or I need a new threat detection system for that thing. And they really know the technical side of it, but they don't understand the project side of it, and so normally how this goes is they find a project manager who they believe can do it. They say what they want. There's probably some go-bys or some templates that the organization uses for a charter. They get the charter. They develop the charter based on what they think they want. The senior executive who wants it may or may not even take a good look at it in many instances. But the charter gets signed and you're off and running. And since roughly 40% of projects fail because of lack of organization, I've heard statistics 39, 40, 45% upwards fail because of lack of organization. How can you possibly have a project which is getting off on the right foot if the charter, which is the foundational document that the sponsor is supposed to write, is actually written by the project manager's perspective? Now think about that. If you've got a document over here that was written by the project manager describing what they think the project should be, and you've got the scope over here which describes what the project management should be, do you see where you've just lost a very basic piece of project management, which is the person who wants the project crisply describing what they want, and the person who's doing the work putting together that documentation, and then before you start to spend a lot of money on development work, you actually sit down and look at the two and see if they're the same thing. That's the beginning of change control and configuration management, making sure that the charter actually describes what the sponsor wants, and down the road a ways, when you've done a bunch of stuff, that the scope statement is reflective of that and everybody agrees. Okay, in the next part of this video series, I will get into requirements. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.